Hi, this is my current GSC NU liability rankings personal as of 6/20/23 in American calendar. And, no plan. So you notice here I have auxiliary number 4. It's pretty spicy. Octillery is still amazing. It's still the same number 2 Pokemon I thought it was for pretty much ever, and that it is on the official VR. However, it's not that it's gotten worse. No, not at all. That's what I'm saying. Simply that I think Stantler and Weezing are just better, more dangerous. They're much more difficult to replicate. Octillery can be somewhat copied by Dugong, but Stantler, it's the only normal type with Earthquake. I think the only normal type with Light Screen. It's got great speed. And then Weezing, it's obviously completely unique. It's the only pure poison. That's good anyways. It's got explosion, it's got great coverage. It's extremely bulky physically. Yeah. Just gonna clear up one thing. I honestly think Weezing is probably a better Pokemon than Xatu. Like, its traits are generally higher value than Xatu's, but I have Xatu ranked higher than Weezing because I think Xatu speed is really nice. Base 95 is great, whereas Weezing can be a bit slow at times with its base, I think, 60. And also, if Xatu gets any crit or any special defense drop with spikes up on the field, it's over basically. A lot of offensive teams use one, maybe two poke. A lot of like offensive Xatu plus Doug Trio spikes teams use Octillery and maybe one other Pokemon as their Xatu answer. They don't want to use their Doug Trio or their own Xatu to switch into other Xatu, which is usually a bad idea. And if not only can Xatu just kind of break through Octillery on its own sometimes because in Power Electric with Spikes Up is favored against other HP Electric Octillery, but Xatu crits Octillery or special drops. Basically a free KO. Crits Octillery is really low, it's gonna have to come in again with Spikes Up, and it's slower than most things. And if it's special defense drop, then it still gets Octillery pretty low, and it has to force something else in that doesn't want to take spikes, usually, because Xatu and other Furo don't like switching into Hidden Power Electric. And basically no grounded Pokemon, besides Houndour or Rare Sneasel, really want to take Xatu Psychic with spikes up. Unless it's like Ninetales, but Ninetales isn't common on Zadok spikes. Best thing you have is like Wigglytuff, maybe Porygon, but it still won't like taking Psychic with spikes up that much. Like, it can go wrong, especially if Xatu crits or Psychic drops again. And in the late in the game, when your opponent's team is weakened more, maybe one of their answers is gone. A special defense drop can just be free KO straight up. It's disastrous. I think Xatu is underrated in its threat potential with spikes up due to how just like game deciding any hacks with psychic or in power can be. I think Xatu just also has really nice defensive utility. It like underrated maybe a bit. It only doesn't check too much, but it's still pretty nice. Stops wheezing. It stops It can stop wheezing. It can stop Stantler. It can stop Kingler is very important because nothing else can, let alone switch into Fearow really, not just threaten it. Because, like, yeah, sure, Magmar threatens Kingler for big damage, it's like 60+% with Thunder Punch, but it's just one hit KO'd by Hidden Power Ground or Hidden Power Rock at +2, and Kingler can tank that. Fearow is faster, but it's only going to do like 35, maybe 40 max with Double Edge. Just going to get shattered by Rock or +2 return, and Kingler can just take another hit, and, and then it's going to be faster than the rest of the team usually, or be in good enough shape to take on Dugtrio or whatever. Essentially, Xatu is the only Pokemon that can switch into and threaten Kingler. Yes, there's Hidden Power Rock Kingler, but it's not very common, and it's more of a new thing. And losing Weezing coverage is important. I'll get to that later. So Xatu is really important for Kingler. A lot of defensive teams, or balanced teams rather, that don't have Xatu are really shredded by Kingler because they don't have a Xatu instead of using a different Pokemon. Xatu also checks Primeape, and it's a hard counter to non-Hidden Power Rock Hitmonlee, and Hidden Power Rock Hitmonlee does like close to 50% to Xatu, but you lose out on Weezing and Gloom, which can be bad. Xatu also counters Gloom, and it can threaten Graveler, Octillery, Persian, Dugtrio. Just generally pretty underrated defensive utility in my opinion. However, I did say I think Weezing is honestly better. Oh, also I have Xatu above Weezing because of its splash ability. It can fit on like basically whatever teams you want. Octillery is also very special, and it's incredibly meta-defining in its team choices and like how it controls team choices. Like, I genuinely think teams with Hidden Power, I genuinely think teams with Ice Beam Octillery and not something else to handle opposing Hidden Power Electric Artillery, say Chinchou, Hitmonlee, Porygon. I think teams without a separate of Octillery, because if you just use like a Grass Herder like Gloom for like Octillery, then your method of handling opposing Ice Beam Octillery is getting into a freeze war with your own Octillery, which is very unreliable and very sketchy. So yeah, I think Ice Beam Octillery is very good, but it's very specific, because if you use Ice Beam Octillery without one of these Pokemon, and opposing Hidden Power Electric Octillery can switch into all day and gain free offensive progress into your team. And yeah, sure, Ice Beam freezes, but those aren't going to happen very often. Yeah, sure, you can increase the odds by keep clicking it, but you can also just keep letting the opposing Octillery switch in over and over. At the end of the day, it's still luck, and you're still in a very unfavorable position. And I think it's just unoptimal. And if you constantly try and freeze fish or double around it, you're gonna get punished eventually, because you want your own Octillery to be doing things. You don't want it stuck doing nothing. That's my problem with Ice Beam Octillery. It's not bad. It's not that bad at all. In fact, it's great, but it's very specific. Power Electric Octillery is much easier to use and much more rewarding on a lot more teams, because it doesn't let other Octillery come in for free. And it also forces Dugong to rest a lot more, which is relevant. However, Ice Beam, again, still very good. Hits the Xatu and Fear much harder, preserves DVs, hits Dugtrio while sleep talking, can freeze, takes grasses, good move. I just think Elect is much better, much more, it's not necessarily better, but it fits on a lot more teams a lot easier. Anyways, back to Weezing. I think Weezing is phenomenal. Greatmon. You cannot replicate Weezing. Poison typing, again, like only pure poison, has explosion, which is incredible, especially off 95 attack. It's really strong. Stab Sludge Bomb, it's great stab. It hits a lot for neutral, and it can 30% poison, which can ruin its resist, like Graveler, Sudowoodo, Dugtrio. They all hate poison. Fires hate poison. Pretty much everything hates poison. It's pretty good. Base power is pretty strong for physical move. It's not Earthquake or Double Edge, but still respectable. Thunder is great. Weezing has a high special attack stat for this tier. It's 85. It's 120 base power move. It slams Xatu really hard for like 60% plus. hits Octillery just as hard. It hits Dugong for like 45-50%. That's really good. It hits Furo for about the same as Zatu. And it can paralyze, which is really deadly for things like Magmar or Porygon. Magmar mainly. Also Flareon and Rapidash. The paralysis chance to test in general very crippling. And it's got great options for your last move. It can be Fire Blast, basically Oko's Pineco, I think. Or at least a very favorable roll. It deals like 70 plus to Gloom. It Oko's Magnemite, and it's just a good middle ground move that's more accurate than Thunder to click between like Doug Trio and something else that you're threatening out. And the other one, main coverage move is Hidden Power Water. Main purpose is for the rocks, because Weezing doesn't actually really lose the rocks, but it still gives them a lot of opportunity because with Fire Blast, because the only way it can really hurt them is Sludge Bomb. Thunder immune, Fire Blast does very little. 10% burn off 85 actually is like basically never going to happen, especially when you're not clicking it that much. It only has 8 PP. So really, the only way you're threatening them is Sludge Bomb Poison, which takes time to stack up and is a little RNG reliant, because you gotta actually get a 30% poison chance. If you keep clicking Sludge Bomb too much, you're gonna let in Zatu eventually, and it's gonna just Psychic you for 85 plus. You're gonna die probably. And so what Hidden Power Water does is it Oko's Graveler and does, I think, probably Oko's Pupitar or gets close. And it does a lot to Sudowoodo, like probably like 40% or so, which adds up with spikes, and Sudowoodo often takes a lot of chip trying to switch into normal moves or taking hits before it attacks. Especially if you click it on the switch, because Sudowoodo is very slow. And Weezing also has Haze if you want to remove boost, mainly from Wigglytuff or Baton Pass. You can also Pain Split if you want for recovery. And the cool set is stall specific, and stall is kind of niche, a little unexplored. It's like just starting to be delved into by Mr. Soup and a couple other people maybe. And it's like Curse Rest Talk. And it's kind of cool because it can just sit on Wigglytuff, really. And it's a boosting threat. Anyways, Weezing pretty much always provides value. It checks Primate, which is best answer to Primate, which is really hard to answer. It shuts down Hitmonlee. It shuts down Gloom, aside from Sunspore Paralysis. And it's decent at checking Stantler, Fearow. It's obviously not great, especially since Stantler has Earthquake and Weezing is slower, but it's decent as far as non-normal disco, and it can just explode on them, or Thunder, Fearow. And Explosion is the main thing I want to focus on, because Explosion ensures Weezing will always get something done, even in, let's say, theoretically bad matchups. And often Weezing will do much more, usually on the defensive side, even if it can't get much done offensively in the face of, say, a Ninetales on the opposing team, or a Rock type, or a Graveler, mainly when Weezing has Hidden Power Fire. Sorry. And Weezing just always provides value, just always gets something done. But I still have Xatu higher, because Xatu, it's not quite to the extent of Weezing and always getting something done, but it is more reliable, I think, with Weezing's prediction issues, and sometimes Weezing can have prediction issues. And it's also, again, the speed. The speed is a big difference maker, in my opinion. And also the crits and the Spidef drops. However, Weezing is still incredible, and it honestly, I think, probably tied with Xatu, or at least very close to where Xatu is. I think it could usurp Xatu soon, personally. Just depends on how the future goes. If I continue to have success and continue liking Weezing. Stantler I have above Octillery, which is probably surprising for a lot of people. I think Stantler is the most overpowered Pokemon in the tier. Well, broken's the better term here, since I'm not necessarily overpowered. It's just the only defensive answer to Stantler is Shuckle. Shuckle is not that great. It's like a B minus tier Pokemon and only fits on Stall, which is in itself a very niche and specific playstyle that's kind of underexplored and not used very much for a good reason because Stall is historically been not the most difficult to break and it's extremely passive. So pretty much everyone and their mother is going to be using offense or balance, and Stantler just cannot be switched into. Frustration off of, I think, base 95 attack hits everything for every non-resist for, at minimum, like 40%, which is just ridiculous damage for something this fast and pretty bulky. It's got 268 speed, base 85. It got okay bulk. Then you have Earthquake. Sorry, hold on. Weezing is the only one that takes less than 40 or so. It takes like 30, I think, but here's where Earthquake comes in. Earthquake hits Weezing for like 45 plus, I think. It also hits the rocks for a lot of damage. It hits rocks for 40 plus minimum, or some probably more, like 50 plus to Graveler, I think. And it just complements it perfectly because, Weezing, the rocks, decent switches to Frustration. They can turn it into offense. Then Stantler just pulls out EQ and is faster than all of them and just hits them really hard, especially with spikes on the field. And the rocks and Weezing gotta like explode on it to do anything back, or switch to Zatu or Firo to do anything in winning that matchup. And just Stantler is impossible to switch into, and it's made even worse because Curse plus Light Screen is the most dangerous Pokemon in the entire tier by far. Has the highest ceiling of anything. Shut up, Wigglytuff. You're not good. Anyways, sorry, this way later. Curse Light Screen Stantler is incredibly difficult to take down once it's set up, and it just bowls over everything. +1, Stantler 2 echoes everything in the entire tier, and Frustration will do like 60, 70 plus to non-resists, while Earthquake will do 70 to like 60, 70 to the resists. And Light Screen and Curse Defense Boost prevent it from being easily killed back unless you have like Cross Shot Primeape or Light Screen is down and you have a Magmar. You can Fire Blast for 660. And it's just it's not pot. And then sorry, I'm fumbling over my words a lot. There's also Rest Talk Stantler, which I think is honestly just as good as Light Screen Curse. And Light Screen Curse is like the dominant Stantler set for a while now, and it's the set everyone is so scared of. And I think Rest Talk is just as good because it absolutely tramples balance, with your Gravelers and your Glooms and your Chinchows and your Bolt Beam Porygons and your Dugongs. Those cannot deal with Rest Talk Stantler. They all fail to 3-8 KO it. And Stantler just rests off any damage and Sleep Talks and just keeps attacking. And balance teams are quite slow, Let's take a typical Graveler Gloom balance team like Xatu, Dugong, Pineco, Graveler, Gloom, and just some generic class like Porygon, let's say. And Stantler just 6-0s that straight up. If it's not Curse Porygon, if it's Volt Beam, which is the most popular set, Stantler just runs over that. And the only decent switch on that team to Stantler is Xatu, because it's not 2-8 for Frustration, but it still takes like 45 plus, and it's immune to Earthquake, which means Graveler's a decent pivot. However, here's the thing. Zatu can't really switch into frustration. If it switches into frustration, it'll lose the Stantler. And if so, you go to Graveler first, and you go to Graveler into Stantler to take the frustration, it's just gonna get 2-hit KO'd by Earthquake, especially spikes up. Though it probably won't be, but anyways, besides the point. It'll probably just get 2-hit KO'd by Earthquake, and you can pivot to Zatu, sure, but Stantler can also just click frustration again because of Snow. Snow's Graveler is not gonna hurt it back really that much without exploding, because yeah, sure, Earthquake will do like 35, 40. Stantler can just rest off that damage or straight up Earthquake it. So Graveler's got to explode on Sandler to do anything, and then your opponent's Pineco can just come back in and set up spikes again, or just explode with their Pineco because there isn't anything stopping it, etc. And just Sandler is, and Sandler is probably the best way of abusing Chinchou because I don't even think Thunder 3 KOs it. It's a base 120 power stab move, and Sandler just rests off paralysis and damage and hits it hard, like hit 2 KOs with both frustration and Earthquake. And it's already really difficult to switch into for balance teams. And when most balance teams give it really free entry with something like Dugong or Gloom or Chinchou, it's just not really possible to stop efficiently if your opponent is playing well and not leaving in their sleeping Stantler in front of Zatu, or not being too liberal with their earthquakes. And they're gonna keep frustrationing until they have a reason not to. Or they can just keep frustrating anyway because the opponent doesn't leave their rock in front of an earthquaking normal type. It's faster and stronger. And Stantler is not possible to stop defensively for any team except for Shuckle. But Shuckle's kind of eh. And Shuckle's not going to be on most teams. I already went over this. And the only way to deal with Stantler is by just out-offensing it straight up. Zasu, Furo, just repeatedly attacking it with Surf from Artillery, using your Pineco, Dugtrio, just straight up exploding on it with something, switching your Primeape into a Frustration, or doubling, or cursing up with like a Wigglytuff or Porygon before it can come into battle. Those are the only ways to really stop Stantler from doing something. And even then, it's always going to be a threat. It's always going to have some sort of defensive utility the opponent can capitalize on to turn into offense. It's so fucking good. Stantler is amazing. If there were a ban put up for Stantler, I'm not sure I could say no. As much as I like Stantler because it's broken deer and I like using it because it's broken. It should probably it would I would be fine with it going even if I'd miss it. I think there should not be offense that cannot be checked in almost any tier. Ban size of GC, by the way. Stantler number 3, not because Octillery is bad. No, not at all. It's still fucking amazing. I just think Stantler is more broken. Just straight up much stronger. Moving down. Pineco, spikes are amazing. Best move in GSC. At the very least, number 2 if you're a recovered gang. But spikes are incredible. The only tier without spikes that is somewhat commonly played is GCZU, and a lot of people think GCZU is pretty bad. Obviously not everyone, especially shout out to Mr. Soup. He's a ZU man, but there are quite a number of people who think ZU is pretty bad, and the number one solution to fix that is to drop Delibird from PU and make it legal in ZU, because Delibird has spikes, and ZU does not have spikes. That's just an illustration of how amazing spikes are. Another thing, in OU, every good team has spikes on it. Even the vast majority of stall teams that have spikes. The only ones without spikes are Drum Quag stalls without Fortress, which are, and most Quag stalls will still have a Fortress, as far as I know. I could be wrong, but. Mm. And that stall in OU, they still need spikes to function. In fact, a lot of stall teams, especially the Raikou ones, just flat out crumble without spikes. They can't do anything without spikes. I know I'm not talking about GSC specifically, but I think that's really important image. It's just how amazing spikes are in Generation 2. And that also applies to NU. NU spikes aren't mandatory, but they're still really good to have whenever you can. The main problem is that you're using Pineco to get them. Pineco's not. I don't think Pineco's a bad Pokemon like others do. You know, spikes, boom, spin, good physical defense, ground and fighting resistance. Those are all good traits. Problem is, it has like zero special defense. It gets two-way killed by most special moves, and it can be hard to bring it in at times if you don't play well, and it can be hard to get your Pineco to do everything. But even just spiking with your Pineco or spinning and then having it die as sack fodder is still amazing in a lot of games. It's still enough value to justify having Pineco in your team, which Spikes just makes so many offensive Pokemon more dangerous. Xatu, Weezing, Stantler, Octillery, Dugtrio needs spikes. Xatu is infinitely more dangerous with spikes. Fearow is infinitely more dangerous with spikes. Everything loves spikes. Mixed Flareon cannot function without spikes, really. Magmar loves spikes. I could go on. Everything adores spikes. Not everything needs spikes, but everything is. All forms of offense are made much better when complemented by spikes, assuming they aren't walled by Xatu or Flare or Fearow, like Gloom is. Then spikes will make that bit of offense better. However, Pineco as an individual Pokemon is not good enough for me to put it higher than number 5 personally. I just think everything in S tier is just straight up better. Dugtrio, I think de facto goes lower than Pineco because, in my opinion, Dugtrio cannot be used without Pineco, but Pineco can be used without Dugtrio. However, Dugtrio is amazing as an individual Pokemon. It's the fastest thing that's here, which is it's just so nice in so many scenarios. It's actually amazing that it's so fast. It's pretty strong, got a base 80 attack, Earthquake. It's got Rock Slide for perfect coverage, except for hitting, except for the pure grasses, which are kind of mid. And it's got Screech, which is nice for removing curse boosts or making it more threatening against sleeping Hand Power Electric Octillery, sleeping Hand Power Electric Xatu. Um, or it can use Swagger, which is infinitely stupid in its own way. I actually made a post on Smogon proposing to ban Swagger, and Dugtrio was one of the main proponents in making it so dumb and stupid. Which that's for another time. And then it's got Substitute to complement the way it forces things like Weezing and the rocks to switch out, and the opponent having to switch into battle with Dugtrio with spikes up. And all of Dugtrio's answers are grounded because Xatu and Fear can help check it, but they aren't like great answers. Like actually great answers. The great answers are Octillery, kind of Dugong, and then that's really it unless you want to use a grass. And spikes and substitute, especially if the opponent's check is a Hin Power Electric Octillery. Like Hin Power Electric Octillery can still answer Dugtrio, but once it's sleeping, and Dugtrio comes in to something else and forces Octillery to come in, and substitute, and Octillery is coming in with spikes up, and Dugtrio has a substitute up, and it only has a 1 in 3 chance to pull Surf. The other two moves don't do nothing, and then Dugtrio can Screech to reduce Octillery's defense. And Octillery is going to be sleeping for 2 turns, possibly longer if it rolls rest. Dugtrio can just set up a substitute and be setting pretty most of the time. Substitute is also just great at just forcing damage, even if like Octillery has to take that Earthquake now. You can't bring in your Fearow or Xatu and force it to Rock Slide, then bring in Octillery. No, can substitute as the Fearow or Xatu comes in and Rock Slide, and even if Octillery comes in, you still get a guaranteed Earthquake on it, and Rock Slide chip, and Spikes. And it's great. Obviously, Dugtria's issues, though, it can be hard to come into battle. Really, entry is pretty limited, aside from aggressive prediction on a Hidden Power Electric Xatu. Main entry points it gets are Wheezing, Chinchou Thunder, and the rocks. However, it still takes a lot of damage. Sludge Bomb does like 25 bout, and it can poison. Wheezing can also just Fire Blast for 35 or whatever, or Hidden Power for like 40 plus, or it can just straight up explode on Dugtrio. Chinchou has Stab Surf that'll do 70 plus. The rocks, aside from Traveler and Pupitar, have Stab Earthquake that'll do like 50. Sudowoodo can curse up or use, and then use Earthquake, which will do like 35 or so, 35, 40 without curse, and even more when cursed. Ninetales can Toxic Dugtrio or hit it with Flamethrower for like 40 plus, etc. Magnemite and Power does about 50. So entry is pretty limited for Dugtrio, but once Dugtrio does get into battle, and if it's positioned well, you know, the opponent's team pretty weakened, it can just take over. And what limited switching opportunities are still great, you know, punishing Graveler for clicking Hidden Power Rock, or punishing Wheezing clicking Thunder, and using them to gain progress is just amazing. And of course, it revenge kills so much with its great speed and good power. However, it also, another downside is that Electries basically requires Spikes, and then usually goes with Xatu. Sometimes Fearow instead of Xatu, but usually Xatu, maybe Fearow alongside, and usually an Octillery as well. And Zadug's, those at 4 of Zadug's 120 base power stat double edge is unstoppable. Fearow also has Drill Peck to complement for Primeape and Gloom, and Himalayan just a generally good move to click while Sleep Talking, or when you don't want recoil. It's got Rest and Sleep Talk for longevity, great longevity. It can switch into Primeape decently well, relatively. It can revenge kill it. It's very valuable. Helps Dugtrio, and it's just really great button click. You just keep clicking double edge until you have a reason not to. It's really strong and great. However, it kind of sucks against the rocks because its best option for them is Hidden Power Ground, which means you don't have Drill Peck, so it's really bad while Sleep Talking versus Xatu and other Fearow, and it lowers your TVs. And it doesn't even do that much to the rocks. It'll do like 30 to Graveler and Pupitar probably, and it'll do like 25 to Sudowoodo. And you can't really revenge kill Primeape very easily now. Like you can do like 50 to it with double edge, and then you just get thundered or cross chopped again. And it's just generally a bad move, so most Fearow would be Drill Peck, and it means it's walled by the rocks. And especially when Fearow like spikes so much, Graveler is like a nightmare matchup for it. You kind of have to poison it with Pineco or Wheezing, or just lure it with Wheezing and Power. Sudowoodo is manageable. Pupitar is also manageable. Pupitar takes like 20, 22 from double edge. It'll die long term if you keep your Fearow alive enough. And Sudowoodo is walled by Octillery, so you can just force it to boom on Oct. You can also force it to boom on like a Cursed Wigglytuff. So Furo is really amazing, but I have it lower than the rest because it actually has hard walls and like multiple hard walls that are all viable. Tatsu has Dugong, and Houndour is really its own hard walls, and Dugong could be crit through if you really want to. Weezing is only walled by Ninetales, really. Sailor has none besides Shuckle. Octillery is only hard walled by Chinchou, really. Him only can get crit. Porygon can get crit, or can just forget to recover. Dugong can get crit. Dugtrio is hard walled by the grasses, which the most viable one is Execute and Bayleaf, and they're still very rare. Fearow, however, has multiple hard walls, and Graveler also removes the spikes that Fearow really loves, and is a dangerous offensive threat in its own right. And Sudowoodo also has Boom. It can be deadly if Octillery is gone, or you just remove your Octillery. However, Fearow is still great. I just think what's above is better, and Fearow can be walled by certain things. Oh, Fearow is also walled by Magnemite, but Magnemite takes like 30 plus from dead, so it can just get crit through. The spikes up, and Magnemite just tends to thud a lot in my experience, so still a great Pokemon. Dugong actually had higher than Fearow recently. It's kind of a mood thing. I think Fearow and Dugong are like tied about in viability. Just depends on what I'm feeling. And right now, I think I'm thinking Fearow is just more dangerous. However, Dugong is still great. It's like a more defensive Octillery, kind of, but much faster. Dugong is much bulkier than Octillery. It's much faster. It has 238 speed compared to 188. It's base, I think, 40 for Octillery and base. No, base 45 for Octillery and base 70 for Dugong. It's a big difference. Dugong now at speeds Flareon, Weezing. Those are the main two, really, but that's pretty big. Dugong also had, despite having a much lower special attack, still does about the same as Ox Ice Beam, if not a little more, because it has stab on Ice Beam. And Dugong's Surf is much weaker, and it does not resist. It's weak to rock, even. It's weak to fighting, and it's neutral to fire. And honestly, that's like a large reason why Octillery is much more common than Dugong. Octillery is a hard counter to Sudowoodo unless they explode with their Sudowoodo, and if they explode with Sudowoodo, then that enables things like Fearow and Weezing. And it also is much better answer to Graveler and Pupitar, kind of. Dugong takes less from EQ, takes a lot more from rock moves. Octillery also resists Fire Blast, making it the best answer to Magmar that is not Ninetales. Because Dugong is neutral to Fire Blast, so it'll take like 35 plus, like 35 to 45 from Fire Blast, and it can get cross-chopped by it. Or Magmar can just sit up Sunny Day, and Surf would do like 30% maybe, and Magmar can just chew a KO and return with Fire Blast. I mean, Octillery resists Fire Blast, so if Magmar wants to really hurt, it has to use Thunder Punch. And even under Sun, Surf will still do like 40 because Octillery is really strong with Surf. Magmar is just super deadly. Same with Flareon even. Dugong is faster, but takes a lot more from Fire Blast. The fighting mechanic is also really relevant because Himalayan, especially Primeape, can be dangerous. Primeape can just bust through Xatu with Thunder. Same with Fearow. Has Thunder for Fearow. And Weezing can die long term if spikes up in Thunder Paralysis and Double Edges. And Primeape gets a lot easier entry on Dugong. It doesn't even have to gain entry, but it can because Dugong is only doing like 30 with Ice Beam or Surf. and Primeape's doing like 60, 70 back with Cross Chop, or even decent damage like 35, 40 with Thunder. Or just substitute, or can just rest talk all over Dugong. Primeape can also just double in on Dugong or revenge kill it. Octillery is a lot harder to do that because it takes a lot more from Primeape takes a lot more from Surf, and Octillery is not weak to Cross Chop, and Thunder does not do that much more than Cross Chop. Anywho, Dugong is really bulky though. I'm talking a lot about its downsides, why Octillery is more common, but it's still a great Pokemon. That bulk is just incredible. It's it has like 95, 100 in HP and Spadef, something around that. And its physical defense isn't even that bad either. It's actually still pretty good. And it's just so bulky, and its Ice Beam is pretty strong. You can also run Encore sets, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I respect their value. And another set is 3 attacks protect on Growth Path, which is a +1 3 attack. A Dugong with a +1 boost from Growth Path Flareon, and the Dugong has 3 attacks but protect, is possibly the scariest thing to face in the tier aside from Full Health Stantler, assuming the opponent does not have a Primeape or Hitmonlee. It's that scary, really. It can just bowl over everything. It's so hard to take down with protecting its massive bulk, and actually has no actual power with the Growth Pass and the great coverage within power. And it's just super good. Dugong's great, but right now I'm feeling like Fearow is slightly better. Again, about tie though, so don't take too much stock in that. It flip-flops, really. Dugong also faces competition from Octillery, but so Octillery also faces competition from Dugong, so I think you personally close to need at least one of Octillery or Dugong on the majority of teams. I think it's really hard to go without one of them because it just those two just make life so much easier. They're both great Pokemon, really, and Octgong is a good structure too. You know, where you use both of them. Going down, I think there's a bit of a drop off. I'm still great, but it is a noticeable downtrend in terms of all around quality. Anyways, Primeape is incredibly scary. It's one of the best breakers in the tier. 105 attack, 95 speed, and basically perfect coverage. The only issue with Primeape is that it can be hard to gain entry at times, and its moves are a bit inaccurate. But I think its moves are still accurate enough where it's worth using, and it's extremely deadly. It's got 100 base power cross chop with the same likelihood to crit as it is miss, because an 80% chance to hit times a 25% chance to crit with the way increased crit chance moves work in GSC. 80% times 20%, 80% times 25% is a 20% chance to crit, and you got obviously a 20% chance to miss. The same probability, so yeah, sure, Primeape has a 20% chance to miss. So it has a 20% chance to crit, and those crits just KO pretty much everything, or get really close to the bulkier ones. And it's just really strong cross chop. Obviously, there are resists for it, like Xatu and Weezing, but Xatu is 2KO'd by Thunder, and hates paralysis. Like, you get a Thunder paralysis. Like, if you hit Xatu on the Switch with Thunder, get the paralysis, and then you hit another, Primeape's in business. That Xatu is dead. You gotta miss one of them or not get the full paralysis. Even then, if you don't get the full paralysis, you can just win the speed tie or tank a psychic and Thunder again. And if you hit, that Xatu's gone, and you still have a Primeape. Thunder also 2KOs Fearow. It does a lot to Kingler. It actually makes Primeape a decent revenge killer to Kingler, though obviously accuracy willing. and it can paralyze Weezing and do like 25, which paralysis spikes, and it just adds up over time. Prime can actually break through. And then Double Edge is a good, strong neutral hit that's 100% accurate. It hits Weezing for about the same damage as Thunder. Just generally good move to click. It hits Gloom for 40 plus. Hits Zatu for like 35, 40. Just good move to have, especially if you don't want to miss with cross chop or you want to save PP. And Substitute takes advantages of switches and spikes really nicely. Eases prediction. Rest Talk Prime is also cool, but it struggles with PP count, accuracy, and really having kind of limited switch-ins. Like, because your moves with Rest Talk Prime are Cross Chop and Thunder. Cross Chop is 80% accurate and has 8 PP. Thunder is 70% accurate and 16 PP, and it's not a physical move. You know, if you had Dodge there, then sure, but that'd be nice. But then you're walled by Zatu and kind of Firo. So you kind of gotta use Thunder unless you have a Houndour for Zatu. And Rest Hawk, yeah, sure, it's nice, but it really only gets you switches on Dugong, Chinchou, and Bolt Beam Porygon. The rest, Rest Hawk doesn't really help. The only thing else it does is means that if Prime is paralyzed or poisoned, it's not basically dead. Also, Sleep Absorb, though sleep is very rare. I think it's a neat set. It's good. It's cool, but its use case is limited because of the issues it has. It's a Rest Talk set. The sub 3 attack set is very good, but has issues with longevity and switches enough. Obviously, Prime always struggles with accuracy, but I think it's the issue's overblown. 80%, 70% are still plenty fine. People use Thunder all the time in Gen 2. People use Hydro Pump all the time in like every gen, really. So Cross Chop and Thunder are fine. Persian's the best dedicated lead in the tier. It's the only dedicated lead in the tier, really, actually, but it's just the best lead overall. Because Double Edge Hypnosis Thief Screech is impossible to switch into. Persian easily 1v1's Zatu lead and Octillery lead does. A lot of leads do not really like getting thieved. Zatu, Weezing, Octillery, Wigglytuff. They hate getting thieved. And Persian actually 1v1 Zatu because you thief, that'll do like 17. Zatu Psychics for you for 40. You double edge, that brings Zatu down to like 40%. You get Psychic for like 40. Your Persian's at like 40% now. And their Zatu is in range of your double edge. And so if they don't want their Zatu to die, they have to switch. And your Persian can just double edge whatever's on switching. Your Persian can double edge whatever is switching in. And just like Persian can just Hypnosis then if it's rock type or Weezing or basically anything without Rest Talk. Weezing, Stantler, Duck Trio. I mean, they don't like switching into double edge really, but you can just Hypnosis them after too. So besides Duck Trio, but let's say it's Weezing or rock type switching it. You can just Hypnosis because you're faster. And you can probably tank a hit. Maybe, I don't know. And just put him out of commission. Assuming you hit, obviously. 60% is pain, but... And anything that isn't a rock type or Weezing is really gonna hate taking that second double edge. And let's say Octillery switches into Persian after the Zatu lead. Octillery can tank a double edge, it'll be down to 16, then it'll rest as the next double edge comes in. Or it surfs as the next double edge comes in, and it can kill Persian, but it's left at like 20%. If it rests, though, it's back at 100, and Persian's at like 45. And here's where Screech comes in. If you predict that Octillery rests, because it doesn't want to be at like 25% after leftovers, and in range of almost everything, then you can just Screech the Octillery as it rests, and then just double edge it back for like 80%, back ends back at 25 after leftovers, or you force Octillery to switch out and you just double edge whatever's incoming. The hypnosis thing also works plenty fine with Pineco. Speaking of Pineco, Pineco sometimes uses lead sets with Miracle Berry just for really just to counter Team Persian. However, it still takes like 40 from double edge, and the spikes can just be spun away later. Or if Persian chooses to, it can thief the Miracle and then Hypnosis, or just Hypnosis twice if it's feeling lucky, and then thief something else. Persian is just really, really difficult to switch into. Sorry for that pause, by the way. Dog stuff. Anyways, there are also other Persian sets. There's subs that are all in the back instead of in the lead. There's Sub Swagger Psych Up, which is the second best abuser of Swagger. And it's just really annoying. It's deadly. There is Rest Talk Persian with Double Agent Thunder. It's kind of like Rest Talk Stantler, but much faster, otherwise weaker. I think a bit overrated by a couple players, but it's still a good set and it expands on what Persian can do. There is, and then there's Sub Screech, which I think is kind of bad. It's not really that bad, but it's like just a largely worse version of Doug Trio. Yeah, sure, you don't have not weak to water, but Doug Trio is so good in large part because it can hit things super effectively. Earthquake can, Rock Slide can threaten things out. Persian's Double Edge is not going to be threatening out a Weezing or Rock type or even really like a Fire type or whatever. And Doug Trio also has actual resistances, so while Persian doesn't have weaknesses, it also doesn't have resistances. Doug Trio at least resists rock and poison, which can be nice. I think Persian's great, but its defensive utility's a bit limited, even with Rest Talk. However, it's really difficult to switch into. Wigglytuff, Curse, I think non-curse sets are not great, but they're usable anyways, so I'm mostly going to focus on Curse. Just generically solid special wall with a boosting threat. It's a bit slow. It's very vulnerable to getting crit or whatever. Hold on one second. Hi, sorry another cut, guys. I just keep getting interrupted. Sorry, it's gonna be a pain to edit. Wigglytuff. Yeah, generic good special wall. However, there aren't many great special attackers that actually like switches into Xatu, Dugong, Chinchou, and Bolt Beam, Porygon, and also Ninetales. That's it. Octillery can 3-KO with Surf, especially with Spikes, and Octillery can outspeed because speed tie. Rapidash is too much with Fire Blast. Magmar is too much with Fire. Sorry, excuse me. Drinking seltzer. Go drink, by the way. Magmar does too much damage with Fire Blast. Can also cross drop crit. Flareon does too much damage with Fire Blast. Especially spikes up. So, just kind of limited in what it can actually switch into, but it can be pretty dangerous once it does get the chance to curse, because all the physical attackers are going to do less damage. Really, only Primeape and Hitmonlee can still damage at that point, or the rocks, but rocks are just going to be switching in right away. Even then, only Robert kind of forced to boot early. Sudowoodo can match up curses, but it still has to boom to break past since Wiggly has rest and is bulky. Really also often forces Weezing to come in and boom, or Pineco to come in and boom. Wiggly really does not take moves. So yeah, forces those moves. Then your Wrigley is like really low. And Wiggly is often an important piece of a team for taking on Chinch, Xatu, stuff like that. And it's really bad to have it gone. I just think its defensive utility is kind of not spectacular. Like, it's fine, but it's nothing too world ending or whatever. I think its threat level is a bit overrated also because Octillery fires a lot of physical attackers, explosions, hacks too. Wheelie hates crits. Like, it's just, and you get so many chances to attack Wheelie too because so often it's just using curse or resting or sleep talking. And for a reason, it needs to stay healthy and it needs to curse stuff to deal damage. You can just keep attacking it, try and crit fish with your Octillery or Zatu if you want. And Wiggly also really does not like spikes. Primate can just crit right through several boosts. Grass Hopper even just deal massive damage if Wiggly's only at +1 so far. I think Wiggly should also use Double Edge generally, letting in Pineco and Wheezing for free if you don't get the Body Slam paralysis luck is really bad. Um, Body Slam is fine, but it's just so weak. It does like 25 to Pineco and like 30% max to stuff like Octillery and Zatu without a curse up. It's just so weak. I think Body Slam is kind of like relying on luck a bit because it's assuming you can tank those special hits without getting crit and boost up enough for it to deal damage, or you can get that Body Slam paralysis. I'm not the biggest fan. I respect it. I know what it does. It's dangerous, but I would prefer Double Edge's reliability more, even if it makes it harder to answer, like impossible to answer Octillery and harder to answer Satu at times. Um, Both are good though. I think Wigglytuff's a bit overrated, I'm gonna be honest, but it's still fine. Still fine Pokemon. I have it at number 10. Wait, no, number 11, which is still good. I just don't think I'm not high on it, like super high on it, like, cause like Wigglytuff is Mon is consistently ranked within the top 10 for a lot of players. I'm not one of those players who think Wiggly's top 10. I think it's a bit generic and the threat level is just overblown. Like, honestly, I think you get swept by Wigglytuff. You got a bad team. Because, like, even just Octillery is a good Wigglytuff answer. Because once Wigglytuff curses, it's slower, then Ock can just surf it over and over. Wigglytuff attacks Octillery when it's that like super boost and like because Octillery comes so close to 3 killing if it doesn't get the good if it doesn't just flat out get the rolls to 3 kill and that's assuming Wigglytuff doesn't have double edge. If it had double edge, it's just knocking itself into recoil range. So its recoil is knocking itself into 3 kill range and then dies. And even if it's not double edge, has return or body slam, it's just gonna keep getting hit by surf and Octillery can just fish for that 12% chance to KO or that crit. And if Wigglytuff bothers killing Octillery, you know, sorry, I don't know how I keep getting interrupted so much. You see that there's gonna be another cut in the video right there. It's gonna be a pain to edit. It's 3:51 a.m. I started recording at about 1 a.m. I don't know how, but I've somehow been interrupted at 4 times now, past midnight. Whenever it's fine. I'm just gonna continue ranting. I think I'm losing it, sorry. It won't be any different tune to do because I'm just gonna cut it, but just for some context. Anyways, on to Kingler. Anyways, point being about Wigglytuff, I think it's a bit overrated, but still a great mon. I still have 11. It's very good. A rank. Perfectly fine. Kingler. Very, very dangerous. Surge Dance. 130 attack. 75 speed. That's great stuff. Frustration, I think is best normal stab, because double edge recoil is pretty bad. And body slam is a bit weak at times. Then hidden power ground or hidden power rock. And then last move, substitute or surf. Hidden power ground is better with substitute. Hidden power rock can go with either, but surf is fine. Sure. Power ground slams Weezing, slams the rocks, slams Chinchou, slams fires. So does rock. Rock also slams fires, but ground is mostly for the rocks and most importantly Weezing. Weezing is the main target for ground because surf is just fine into the rocks. You got substitute for process easing and boom scouting and prediction easing and status blocking. Alternatively, you can use hidden power rock over hidden power ground. It does a lot less to Weezing, but in return it OHKOs Xatu and Furo, which frustration, even +2 double edge cannot OHKO Xatu, which has like 90% max. It's a chip Xatu, which can be unreliable, since Xatu loves to use rests and is spikes immune. And Xatu is the best answer to Kingler since it dodges in, since it outspeeds. Kingler needs to boost up to 2-hit KO with frustration. And Xatu can 2-hit KO with Psychic or Hidden Power Electric. And even while resting, it can use Sleep Talk to Psychic or Hidden Power Electric Kingler. And generally, Xatu is just by far the best answer to Kingler in most scenarios. However, Hidden Power Rock turns Halo, you still will end up taking like 55%, like 50 to 55 after leftovers. But you were OHKO Xatu, and Kingler's pretty fast, 248 speed. Effective is quite good, and it's very physically bulky. It's only really specially frail. I think it has like 100 defense. It's got decent HP, kind of. And just hits very hard after Swords Dance. And Pan Power Rock turns the tables on Xatu, and it also helps her Sphere, which Sphere doesn't necessarily threaten Kingler, but it still does like 35 with Double Edge or so, and it can live a Frustration and Double Edge again. That'll do quite a bit to Kingler. And Rock can just grab the OHKO. Rock retains the really strong hand, like the basically OHKO and fires at +2. Frustration and Double Edge are still plenty strong enough to kill stuff like Chinchou at +2. And then you can use Surf for the rock types, or lure the rock types with something else, or force them to boom on Octillery. Or you can just, use Substitute for the regular reasons. Greatmon, but has trouble switching in, trouble sticking around, and obviously Xatu. Rock struggles a lot more with Weezing though, because +2 frustration is only going to do like 50, maybe 60 at most. And Weezing can just thunder. Hidden Power Ground, however, at +2 will do like 80, 90. Even +2 double edge only does like 65, 70, like 65 probably. Just not much when Weezing can explode or thunder for crap ton, especially when Kingler switcher might already be switching into attack or and spikes up and all that. Chinchou, its only purpose in life is to hard counter Octillery and Dulong. Pretty good though. It sucks outside of that, but still decently fast, got a strong thunder. The strongest 56 special attack can get you anyways. And it's quite good into Zodiac spikes, because really the only mon they use that can answer Chinchou long term is Wigglytuff, and even then it's not going to be every team. Like maybe Restock Deer, but like Deer on those teams likes to be Curse Light Screen for extra offensive pressure. And Curse LS Deer hates being paralyzed by Chinchou. Thunder. Surf hits Dugtrio for like 75, and there might be spikes up. Thunder hits Xatu really hard. Weezing does not like taking repeated surfs and thunders with spikes up, especially when it's slower. Porygon hates paralysis. Prime hates paralysis. It's more so defensive teams that are good into Chinchou, because you got Wigglytuff, Rest Talk Deer, Rest Talk, Hitmonlee, Gloom. Those are the main Chinchou answers. So it's a bit of a, and obviously it can't switch in at all outside of Octillery and Dugong, ever, or unless it's Ninetales, but I think it's pretty good. Countering Octillery and Dugong is good enough, and turning them into offense is good enough, in my opinion, to be A tier. Porygon, I'm very high on Porygon. I think it's great, even though a lot of other people have it like B plus, low A minus. I think it's phenomenal. It's able to switch into Xatu, Octillery, Dugong, um, really well, and just recover off their hits. And you can threaten Zadog spikes really well with Thunder plus Ice Cream. Oh, Porygon can also switch into Dugtrio, kind of. Can switch into Stantler with curse sets if Porygon has curse. Um, I'm not sure how well it switches into Shiro as a curse set. I haven't copped it. Try Dodge Chuikyo without spikes up, but I don't know. Can threaten Zadok spikes really well because they got Xatu, Octillery, both weak to Thunder. Pineco takes a lot from Thunder, hates Thunder Wave paralysis, and just dies. And it can't answer Porygon long term. Dugtrio is weak to Ice Beam. The last two mons often don't like dealing with Porygon either. Weezing hates paralysis, doesn't like being chipped by Thunder. Ice Beam with spikes up. Furo, weak to both Thunder and Ice Beam. Cursed Light Screen Deer hates being paralyzed. Prime hates being paralyzed. Magmar hates being paralyzed, etc. Cursed Porygon is also great. It can, instead of its Bulbing Porygon kind of struggles in more defensive teams because you got Ninetales and Wigglytuff just sit on it. Since Thunder and Ice Beam, neither of them are super effective into Ninetales and Wigglytuff, and you just like Wigglytuff can keep boosting up. Ninetales can toxic. However, Cursed Porygon is pretty good because it's like Cursed Wigglytuff, but has Recover and Thunder Wave, which are amazing buttons. Recover's got 32 PP in Gen 2. It's amazing. And it just lets Porygon live so much longer than it should with those honestly kind of bad stats. Like, it walls Xatu. It's a good answer to It's like a decent answer to Octillery. It's a good answer to Dugong if you don't get frozen. And you can, I think you can even switch into Rest Talk Deer with Cursed Porygon, because you take like 45 from Frustration, just keep recovering till you're out of range of Frustration plus Frustration +1. Until you're out of range of Frustration and Frustration into +1. You can just keep recovering. You just bully Rest Talk Deer, kind of, if you're healthy. And Thunder Wave is amazing for spreading paralysis. It's really good, especially since it makes you now faster, which is amazing if you're just trying to curse up or break past something. Like, Cursed Porygon has a much easier time when it can paralyze Xatu and Octillery first before cursing. And Thunder Wave also complements Recover very well because you get full paralysis. That means you get an extra, and you can recover and extra free turn to click something else that isn't Recover. and it's great. And Curse Porygon can just quickly snowball. Thunder Wave also de-incentivizes Primate, which is Porygon's best offensive check, because Primate can just OHKO Porygon straight up with a cross chop. And even at +1, it'll probably do a boatload, and you can also just crit. And probably also a substitute to take advantage of Thunder Wave. That's a bit of a problem. Weezing is also a bit of a problem. Doesn't like being paralyzed, but Porygon hates being poisoned. Can't switch into it at all, when otherwise it would be a pretty fine switch in instead of Boom. Magmar, it kind of doesn't. Porygon doesn't really like it. Fire Blast does too much. Cross Chop does too much. Same with Flareon. Fire Blast does too much, and Flareon's gonna growth up. Hitmonlee bullies Bolt Beam Deer. Sorry, not Deer. Hitmonlee bullies Bolt Beam Porygon too, because it takes like nothing from Thunder and Ice Beam, has Rest Talk for paralysis, and can just high jump kick Porygon into Oblivion, or just body slam paralysis, and Porygon's basically dead. Porygon not running Rest is also a reason why it's not a good answer to Chinchou, because it can just get paralyzed by Thunder, and then it's basically dead. It's kind of useless. It kind of needs to not be paralyzed. Porygon is also a good answer to Graveler if it has Bolt Beam, because either set really, but Bolt Beam's much more immediate. Because Ice Beam will do a lot, and it can recover, and you're faster, and Graveler Earthquake will do like 45, 50, which is not enough with leftovers in the mix. While Curse can just repeatedly curse up on Graveler and force it to explode, and they can spike up with Pineco, or take advantage with another one of your Curse normals, or a Fearow, or a Fire Blast Weezing. I just think Porygon is really good. Recover and Thunder Wave are incredible tools to have. Just so great. And the ability to run either Thunder plus Ice Beam or Curse plus Double Edge is really nice because they have entirely different checks. Curse Pori is shut down by the Rock Rounds and actually I don't know. Kind of maybe they don't have. Bolt Beam's Pori is shut down by Ninetales, Wigglytuff, and Hitmonlee maybe. Mainly. While Curse can be prevented by... I don't know. I think on paper Curse is the hardest to stop, so maybe just Body Slam Wigglytuff, that's fun. Exploding on it, statusing it. Well, statusing it and exploding is for both sets, but exploding is especially for Curse. Same as status, because Curse needs to spend more turns not clicking an attacking move, and Double Edge causes recoil. Anywho, just the rock grounds, and just grounds, because they're immune to Thunder Wave, more so the rock grounds, especially Pupitar. You can just like crit fish, Pupitar also Screech, and of course Prime can just crit through it. Anyways, I think Porygon's great. It's versatile. It's got the best buttons, some of the best buttons in the game. And it's surprisingly bulky with recover and leftovers. The GC mechanics having max bulk. I think it's underrated. It should definitely be used more. But, anyways, Rant over. Got Porygon next. Magmar. Magmar is unwallable unless you use Ninetales. Fire Blast off of 100 special attack is really deadly. It's got great speed too. 93 is base 93 is quite good. It's even got 95 attack for really powerful cross chops. No stat, but they hit really hard. Against super effective targets like rock types and normal types. Fire Blast off of 100 special attack is the strongest attack in the tier, special wise, because Octillery does not learn Hydro Pump. and Magnemite has lower special attack. And Magmar has great coverage too. Got obviously Crossed Up, already said, for rock types, and potentially critting through normal types. You should probably be clicking Fire Blast against normals because it's more accurate and it's stronger if you don't get crits. Anyways, Magmar also has Thunder Punch, which can do 3 KO Octillery, which is great. Also does like 60 to Kingler, which is wonderful. Mainly for Octillery though, and also 100% accurate move on Xatu and Biro and Dugong. Just nice coverage. Speaking of Dugong, you got Sunny Day, which I said earlier, bullies Dugong. You can switch into Ice Beam or just on Revenge or double, and you can set up Sunny Day. Surf is now only doing like 25% maybe, and then Fire Blast is now 2-8 KOing Dugong, assuming it hits. Dugong also is not just generally not a good Magmar switch in, aside even if you ignore Sunny Day, because Fire Blast is going to do like 40%, probably, depends on the roll. Thunder Punch is solid damage too, it's going to do like 30, 35, and then Cross Chop is going to do a lot, it's going to do like 45, and it can crit, and Dugong is just not a good answer at all, especially if you throw Sunny Day in there. I think Sunny Day is the best one. I think Ken Power Ground and Thief are kind of mid. Hen Power Ground does not do enough to 3-KO Ninetales if I remember correctly, and Ninetales will just Toxic you back, or even Reflect if it has it, and just sit on you regardless. It's mainly for Rapidash, Flareon, and other Magmar, and 100% accurate move on the rocks, and also hits Chinchou. It 3-KOs Chinchou, or 2-KOs even, but it's Chinchou. You do not really want to be taking that damage from Chinchou, I think. Yeah, sure, you can threaten Chinchou. You can also just get Thunder Frost. This Magmar is not good switch into Chinchou at all. And if Fire Blast comes in, yeah, sure, you can hit Bark Ground. Now you're taking like 50 from Surf or something like that. Anywho, Rapidash is still faster than you, can just double edge you. And Power Ground will really do enough, because it can just repeatedly double edge you until you die and then rest off damage. Like, yeah, sure, you can 3-KO it, but Rapidash is going to do enough chip damage to you where you can just like bring in Xatu eventually, and Xatu can live a Fire Blast easily and just Psychic you twice. And it does like nothing to the rocks really. Hidden Power Ground is trying to do like Furo Hidden Power Ground did like 25, 26 to Pseudo, so Magmar Hidden Power Ground would do slightly more, which is still like nothing. Flareon is really physically frail already, so it's going to take a lot from Cross Chop. However, it also does a lot of damage back to Magmar with Double Edge. And I just think Sunny Day is generally more useful than him Power Ground. It's crazy powerful Fire Blast and shutting down Dugong and like completely, and potentially, and it edges your bets versus Octillery too, which is important. Like, you sure still take a lot from Surf under Sun, like 35, 40 I think, but especially if Octillery is resting, which probably will from Thunder Punches, it helps you break past it since you'll be taking less from Surf, and you take very little from Hidden Power Electric and Ice Beam. I think Thief is also kind of mid, because it makes it impossible for Magmar switching, like, switching in Magmar into an attack with spikes up, like or whatever, like Xatu Psychic, for example, is already pretty bad. But you throw in the lack of leftovers recovery, and then you have to spend a turn clicking Thief instead of like Fire Blast. It's really hard to do things because your Magmar is just gonna die too fast. I don't like it. The main issues with Magmar are prediction and consistency, and also team competition. Because Magmar is like a breaker with minimal defensive utility, and there are a few of those, Stantler, Primate, like they don't have minimal defensive utility, but it's not great. And Stantler and Primate are usually easier to make use of Magmar. They're also physical attackers, which helps, especially since neither of them are walled, or well, not walled. Magmar isn't walled by artillery, but you know what I mean. Um, Magmar has stops. Primeape and Sandler don't really, kind of don't. Anyways, Magmar's Fire Blast is 85% accurate. Cross Chop is 80% accurate, so not great. Fire Blast especially tends to miss a decent bit, which is really annoying. You don't really click Cross Drop that much, but it can miss, which is always a pain. Um, in prediction, like if you Thunder Punch into October, you can just go to Doug Trio, and then you're dead. Um, Graveler takes like 30 from Fire Blast and 45 from Cross Chop, which is actually kind of bad, like good damage on Graveler, but it's still not enough to really dissuade Graveler from switching in, especially as a balanced team. Um, and balanced teams are really threatened by Magmar since they're so slow and they're really weak to repeated Fire Blasts, especially if they're Gloom Balance and they don't have a Ninetales, like a Graveler Gloom Bounce. Those really hate Magmar, because Graveler just takes so much and Noctiller can be pressured with Thunder Punches and just general chip damage from Xatu. Anyways, Duck is also a pain in the ass, because it can stifle Thunder Punches and make Magmar really have to think about what moves it wants to click, and it's a great revenge killer. And obviously there's always Ninetales to just shut Magmar down completely. Flareon. Growth Pass is absurdly busted. Already talked about it with Dugong a little bit. Growth up with Flareon, screens up, pass it to Dugong with 3 attacks and protect, and unless the opponent has a fighting type, it's over. Not over, but you get like 2-3 kills probably if you're able to predict around a Wheezing Boom. It's really deadly. And then and you can also pass to Xatu or Octillery or even Wigglytuff or Magmar if you want. Though Magmar's going to be a bit difficult because it's weak to Dugtrio and an Octillery, just like Flareon is. Mixed Flare is also a great Pokemon, underrated, because 130 attack double edge is easily 3 killing Octillery and Ninetales, especially with spikes. It's really good damage. And then you still have a 95 special attack Fire Blast to threaten things really hard. I'd say difficult, really hard. Even 2 King Xatu if you get the 80% roll. It just does a lot of damage. And Flareon has good special defense too. It's got 110 special defense, which makes it hard to take down with special attackers. The only special attacker that can really revenge kill it is Dugong and kind of Chinchou. Because Xatu Psychic does like 30%, which is not very much, and a lot of the other special attackers are slower than Mixed Flare, Octillery mainly, or they're fire type attackers like Ninetales and non-HP Ground Magmar. Um, Flareon can run a coverage move like Hidden Power Ground or Shadow Ball. Hidden Power Ground hits rock types for decent damage and hits Chinchou even harder than Double Edge. It also hits fires for harder than Double Edge, and it also doesn't do recoil. Also, however, it cuts into DVs. Shadow Ball can 2-hit KO Xatu guaranteed. Fire Blast is like an 80% chance or something like that, I think. And obviously 85% accuracy of Fire Blast, and it costs PP. Well, Shadow Ball is 100% accurate and always 2-hit KOs. It's pretty nice. However, it hits like nothing besides Xatu, really. Flareon in last move I think Baton Pass is generally the best one. It's like Try Passing is just generally good. Free switch to Stantler or Doug Trio in front of certain threats, like an incoming Octillery or Pseudo Widow. It also scouts for it just dry pass, just good generally. There's also you can also use Protect, which doesn't dry pass obviously, but helps with leftover. It's the same reason why 3 attacks Dugong uses left Protect. It racks up left. Headphones died again. Life is hell. Ninetales is pretty good. However, it's walled by Artillery and Dugong and Chinchou and kind of Wigglytuff and cannot make progress at all into other Ninetales or Rapidash and can give entry to Dugtrio and the Rocks. A lot of flaws, however, I think it's pretty good on average into most everything else, especially Weezing. It also really de-incentivizes Rocks and Dugtrio from coming in because of Toxic. De-incentivize Light Screen Curse Stantler from trying to set up on it with Toxic. Porygon hates Toxic. Um, ugh. 5 a.m. Oh my god, dude. It's taking way too long. I think Ninetales pretty good. It's got some severe issues, but otherwise generally above average. Graveler is really good. It's on a rise. Rapid Spin is great. It's great offensive potential with 95 base attack and Stab, Earthquake, and Devour Rock, and Explosion. However, it's very slow, low special defense, and exploitable weakness, Fork's weaknesses to mainly water, but also grass. Also weak to grounded fighting, which is never good. Sudowoodo. Wait, wrong Pokemon. Hitmonlee. Great special defense. Sits on Dugong and Octillery and threatens them. Sits on Chinchou. Sits on Bulbine Pori. Can threaten Wigglytuff and the rest of the normals. Though it doesn't like switching into them because its physical defense is ass. However, Zatsu, Weezing, Fearow are pretty free into it. More so Zatsu and Weezing. Fearow doesn't like taking high jump kicks. Gloom is also pretty free. Body Slam ruins. Body Slam paralysis can ruin Gloom and Weezing, but it's nothing to Hitmonlee and Zatsu. Power Rock does a lot to Zatsu and Fearow, but does nothing to Gloom and Weezing. Kind of a tough life. Those are really, really physically frail, meaning Dugtrio can take advantage. However, it's got great special defense. High jump kick is strong, causes 120 base attack, 85 base power stab move with good super effective coverage, hitting all the normals and the rocks. Can have trouble switching into non-special attackers though. And the most prominent special attacker hits it super effectively. Restock, good stuff. I used to be like him only more. I had like the top 8 minus a few months ago, but back then I also thought Weezing was not number 2, arguably number 1, so yeah. Also, I just think the fires are better than where I rated them before. And also Graveler Rising. Sudowoodo's good, but it's walled by Artillery, which is a pain in the ass. It's good at everything though. Even when Artillery is around, it can still explode on it, which is never bad. I think I have Sudowoodo rated more higher than more people recently. Sudowoodo is going down to like a B plus for a lot of people I've seen. But my rationale is like Sudowoodo is always doing something, even if it's walled in a matchup, it's still exploding on something. Probably Octillery, maybe Dugtrio, or a Cursed Wigglytuff, which is never bad, even if it worsens you into Fearow. If you use it on the right team, you'll still have a manageable Fearow matchup even after Sudowoodo's gone. And I think Boom is just really, really good. It's got great bulk, good super effective coverage. I don't think it's that bad, but obviously being walled by Octillery unless you Boom on it is pretty bad. Also doesn't like Dugong, Dugtrio, Primeape. Even if Dugong is weak to rock, it still only takes like 45, can still come in and click surf. And takes a lot of chip damage, not only with how slow it is and spikes and coming in on moves. Moving down, Gloom. Very nice defensive piece, but being walled by Zatu and Furo prevents it from kind of like ever making any progress, which is a pain if you don't use Houndour with it, and Houndour, Gravel, or Gloom is really constrictive. Trust me, I've tried plenty. I've tried making Gravel or Gloom Houndour plenty. It always ends up being really Dugtrio weak, or there's like one or two structures that work well with it and aren't Dugtrio weak. That's even with using Ice Beam Mocked and Hidden Power Grass Gloom. It's still really Dug weak. And that's not to mention Kingler. Or Hidden Power or Water Wheezing. Anywho, I'm going a little off topic. What can I do? Tired. Interrupted a lot. Anyways, sorry for rambling. Gloom's a nice defensive piece. Shreds paralysis, can poison stuff. Sticks around a lot. Stuffs in Power Electric Artillery. Stuffs Chinchou sides from Thunder Paralysis. However, it's really difficult to make progress with it due to Zatu and Furo, and I believe Gloom is, Graveler's almost necessary, because otherwise you just let in Pineco and you get spiked up all over and free boom and GG. Butar, really nice and strong rock ground. Very threatening, underrated piece. However, it has a lot of competition with Graveler because Graveler's Rapid Spin and Boom are so nice, and it's stronger and physically bulkier. Her Pupitar is fine SPDF, close to the same spec as Pseudo, which is pretty good. No Boom, but instead you have Screech, which is a decent consolation prize, lets you break past normals without exploding yourself, and just generally good, especially with spikes. I think it's pretty good. It's just hard to fit because you usually want Graveler or Dugtrio. Kind of have to make room specifically for Pupitar. Dunsparce, it's like Return Wigglytuff. And Return Wigglytuff is kind of mid. So therefore Dunsparce is mid. But Dunsparce also has to compete with Wigglytuff. The reason Wigglytuff is largely better is because Body Slam and Double Edge are really nice moves to have, and Dunsparce doesn't have either. However, Dunsparce has a slightly lower special defense. However, that doesn't really matter since I think Wigglytuff is a bad auxiliary answer anyway. Dunsparce still has enough special defense to take on Zatsu and Dugong, which is wondrous. And in exchange, you get slightly better physical defense, which is, I believe is important for setting up on Furo, Dugtrio, Stantler, and Wheezing. Dunsparce can also use a Glare set, which is kind of mid, but it's still nice. It's a paralysis spreading win condition. Still has enough special to bulk. I think it's more specific than Rest Talk, but it's still fine. Houndour, pretty shitty Pokemon, but it kills Zatu, and that's nice for Body Slam Hitmonlee and Gloom. And Primeape and Wheezing. Mostly Gloom and Hitmonlee. Anyways, I think Houndour is kind of a bad Pokemon, but it enables some stuff nicely. Oh, it's also really good with Kingler if you can fit it. The main issue with Houndour is obviously is fitting it while also justifying it, because you can fit Houndour, but you can also have a team slot where you'd be better off using something that isn't Houndour. I think Houndour is fine. I think what it does is important enough at enabling to warrant its placement, though obviously I'm also a bit favored towards it because I've been used a lot of teams, a lot of Graveler, Gloom, Houndour teams trying to make it work. So, and Houndour performs well on those, even if the Dugtrio weakness is painful. It could just as easily be at the top of B plus as it could be at the bottom of regular B. Really depends. I'll stick with the middle for now. I think Houndour probably leans more towards B, but it doesn't really matter. Kind of just there to kill Zatun and be sack fodder is what it is. Maybe it kills something else, but probably not. Anyways, it's fine. Killing Zatu is nice. Um, Magnemite, I think it's really inconsistent and hard to get in besides from Zatu slash Fear. Luckily for Magnemite, one of Zatu and Fear or Fear will be in basically every matchup unless the opponent's bad, using a shit team. However, I think it's kind of hard to extract value beyond it, especially since Zatu and Furo force it to rest so much, especially with Spikes, and you just crit Magnemite and it's gone. Or Spadef drop in case of Zatu also. And Magnemite is really inconsistent because Thunder has 70% accuracy. I know with Prime I said it wasn't that bad, but for some reason when I use Magnemite, it's really hard for it to actually land Thunder. Especially with grounds in the mix, like, yeah, you have Pin Power Ice, which does like 50 to Dugtrio, but then Dugtrio Outspeeds and Earthquakes, and something like a Stantler for Ninetales or Magmar or Prime, you can just come in on the Hidden Power Ice on you trying to predict Dugtrio and just take advantage of you easily. And if you try and land Thunder on the whatever Stantler or something trying to predict our ice, then they can just bring in their Dugtrio and gain free momentum. And Magnemite being forced to rest so often doesn't really help since it barely has enough bulk to dodge a 3-K from Satsu and Furo spikes up. And it's constantly going to be not directly controlling what moves at you. It's going to either be resting, which does no damage, or it's going to be sleep talking, which is inconsistent. It can pull the wrong move at the wrong time, or it can pull just straight up pull rest, which also does nothing. However, it's still extremely deadly. Don't get me wrong. 95 special attack, 120 base power thunder is extremely deadly. It's really strong. It 2-hit kills even Stantler. It can paralyze, even though I've personally never experienced a thunder paralysis myself. I think it's okay. It's just difficult to fit and really inconsistent. Yeah, I think Magnemite is too specific. Like, really the only value it provides is it checks Zatu and Furo in the same slot, which is nice and all, but it doesn't do much beyond that in terms of switching into stuff, really. Aside from, like, Gloom and Persian, but, Gloom, Persian, Porygon, Wigglytuff, or what else it does, but out of those, I think, like, Porygon and Wigglytuff are really the only real ones worth actually considering. Like, yeah, Persian is nice, but Persian usually just kill within the first, like, 5 to 10 turns of the game. Usually 5. Like, 5 to, yeah, somewhere from 5 to 10, so Persian dies fast. Even though it's nice to have a switch in. And Wigglytuff, you can just miss Thunder repeatedly, or get crit, or whatever. Porygon, though, I will admit, is very nice, so. Or I still think Mag is just pretty limited. It's one crit away. It's like it's so close to just getting 3-8 KO'd by things it's supposed to answer. It's inconsistent. It's hard to fit, really, in my opinion, and I'm just not that fond of it. However, I do respect its potential. Not say it's not outright bad. It's just hard, in my opinion, hard to extract value from it. Rapidash, I think, is pretty bad. Just use Ninetales, honestly. Fire Blast is nice, but Ninetales can just run Fire Blast. Rapidash has to use Fire Blast to differentiate it from Ninetales because Ninetales likes using Flamethrower. Ninetales actually has one more special attack than Rapidash, so it's technically stronger. Just uses Flamethrower because it's inherently more bulky, so it's more defensively natured. Ninetales and Rapidash are actually very similar in stats. Ninetales has 81 special attack, 105, sorry, 100 speed, and Rapidash has 80 special attack and 105 speed. However, Ninetales is much bulkier, and while Rapidash has decent physical attack stat, Rapidash uses Fire Blast and Double Edge just to differentiate from Ninetales because Ninetales uses Flamethrower and Toxic. Flamethrower is generally a better move than Fire Blast, I think. Obviously, with Magmar and Flareon, you need the powers because you're not sticking around too long without Rest Talk. But Ninetales and Rapidash have the bulk where they can Rest Talk and stick around. Ninetales uses Flamethrower because it's the better move for more quote-unquote defensive Pokemon for like it with the bulk. And so let's use Flamethrower for that PP and harvest accuracy. Ninetales has to use Fire Blast just to differentiate. Ninetales has to use Double Edge instead of the generally better Toxic just to differentiate from Ninetales. I think that's like that's how I view it. That's just how I view it. I think that's enough of a picture to paint why Rapidash generally worse. Like only real benefit is 5 speed. Like Ninetales is still not really breaking through Octillery and Dugong, since Fire Blast is not do enough to Dugong to 3 KO. Since it's so much weaker than Flareon and Magmar, which can 3 KO Fire Blast. Anyways, Ninetales is walled by the rocks. It walled by Ninetales and Double Edge only does 30 to Ninetales and Octillery. That's not very much, especially when Ninetales and Octillery are probably going to be resting often. Especially Ninetales, since it's so fast. But Octillery is slow, but that means it's going to be resting after the opponent attacks. It's going to be at 100%. And it's Ninetales does not want to stay in. And it's just it never found success from Rapidash personally on the few occasions I have used. Oh yeah, just few occasions because I've never really found a reason to justify it over Ninetales. Like, yeah, sure, it can technically threaten Octillery more, but like I just said, Octillery is going to be 100% most of the time. Double Edge only does like 30 to 35. That's not a 3 KO. Even with spikes, it's I think an unfavored roll or something like that probably. And Octillery, meanwhile, does like probably 80 with Surf back, and Rapidash is still walled by rocks, and still doesn't like Dugtrio, and still is barely enough bulk to not get 3 AK'd by Zato, and still is barely a wheezing answer, because there's a 50% chance to get 3 AK'd by Sludge Bomb without spikes. And I don't like Ninetales. Sorry, I don't like Rapidash. I think it's not worth using on a team. But I don't have it ranked lower because I think its trace isn't. If you ignore Ninetales, Rapidash is perfectly fine. But I think considering Ninetales, I goes much lower. You could argue if I put Dunsparce in B plus and Wiggly in A, then sure, but it's also if again another way to view it, it's like Wiggly is A, Dunsparce is B plus, that's 2 tiers higher. Ninetales is A minus, Rapidash is B, it's 2 tiers higher, so whatever. Dragonair is a good Pokemon, but it's fortunately very limited. It's basically confined to Growth Pass, maybe some other form of VP. However, what it does is nice double screens, D-Wave, Fire Blast with Miracle Berry, good resistances, prevents Pineco from spiking, set screens or Growth Pass. It's nice, even though it dies pretty fast and it's limited in teams. I think it's good as a Pokemon, but doesn't really do too much. And hard to fit on most teams, which is unfortunate. Quick mentions before I forget, because I'm moving on to B minus. Actually, I'll do them later. Eradicate, good Pokemon. Too much competition though. Double Edge Super Fang, you can run Rest Talk, you can run like Hidden Power, Grass, / Water, / Ground, and then Screech. Really depends on what you want. If you want to run Rest Talk or Screech. Preference really. Both are good, but either way, 97 speed with 81 attack, stab 120 base power, Double Edge, and Super Fang is quite good. And then coverage with Screech if you want for spreading more damage. And being a great Fear supporter, you can just run Rest Talk for being like a mini Fear, for being like what Persian's trying to do, but different. Being faster than Zatu and Prime is really excellent, and it's pretty strong and annoying. But it has a lot of competition with mainly Firo, but also Rest Talk Persian, Rest Talk Stantler. Yeah. Execute is Boom, Stun Spore, Stab Psychic, good physical bulk, can run Sleep Powder if you want, can run Power Grass if you want, can run Thief if you want. If just ground actually, the first ground resist that isn't a flying type on my list so far. The main issues with Execute is it takes like 25 from Oxurf, which is not good, especially Spikes Up, and Egg is slower. And it's supposed to be a quote-unquote electillery check because, resists both water and electric, but it's just so especially frail, and it's weak to fire, and just doesn't really have a special attack stat it needs to deal with Zatu or Fires, or Firo, or Dugong. Actually, ignore Dugong and Powergrass. I mean, it just doesn't really have the special attack stat it needs, so it's kind of forced to just, like, clicking Stun Spore, maybe Psychicking on a fighting type, or preventing Dugtrio from making progress and just exploding. And it's also hard to fit. I like it, but it's limited in what it can do offensively. So it's kind of forced being a boom bot. Maybe spread status, but it's really held back by Zatu mainly. If Zatu didn't exist, it'd be easier since Firo doesn't actually resist Psychic. Bayleaf is good for very bulky teams or stall. However, it lets in a lot of offensive threats, mainly Firo and Weezing's safely, so it has to be backed up with a good defensive core. It's also hard to find a reason to fit outside of those very bulky teams. And as an individual Pokemon, it's kind of limited to supporting slash defensive purposes, which can be frustrating to use, I imagine. Farfetch and Lady are both with time passwords. Farfetch's Swords Dance Pass, Lady is much bulkier. It does not have Swords Dance, but it has Late Screen and Barrier. Lady is a more of a facilitating passer, facilitating a setup while passing speed, something like Curse Deer, while Farfetch just passes the SD straight up and can agility too. I think Farfetch is much more dangerous, why I have it higher, but Lady is much more reliable, I imagine. Shuckle, Stallmon, stand, you know, not much. Mantine's a Stallmon, but I have it lower than Shuckle because it's not even guaranteed on stall. Because Dugong also has a strong place on stall. Like, really the only reason to use Mantine over Dugong, honestly, is Growth Pass is a threat to stall, but Growth Pass is enough of a real threat to stall that Mantine is worth using. Haze also has a lot of PP. Otherwise, just honestly use Dugong, though, in, like, every situation. Before I forget, Hitmontop's another Stallmon, the main spinner on there. It wasn't on the VR template that I used. But it's basically just a bulky spinner that can shut down Dugong without having to worry about freeze like Mantine, or having to try and PP stall it like your own Dugong. Rapid Spin has a lot of PP too, which is nice. Um, it's especially bulky, and unlike Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee has actual physical bulk. 95 defense is quite good, which is why it's used over in stall. But outside of stall, just use Hitmonlee. It's much better. Even Hitmonchan would be better. Hitmonchan is unviable. Um, Sneasel is good. I have it above Mantine. Hitmontop is above Mantine. Sneasel is above Hitmontop. Maybe above Shuckle. Not sure yet. Probably just above Hitmontop. Essentially, it counters Zos. You can just switch in on it. You run Frustration, Screech, Toxic Moonlight. It can stick around. It counters Dugong unless you run out of Moonlight PP. Counters Zatu It's a decent answer to Octillery, kind of, not really, but mainly Zatu, also Dugong. And you can just switch in on Zatu and a lot, and Dugong a lot, and just turn it into offense with Screech and Spikes and Toxic prevents Pineco from being a good switch. It also it's like Dynamic Punch, and it prevents the Rocks from being a good switch. Main problem with it is that it's really hard to justify a team slot, and also it's hates Weezing, because Weezing can Sludge Bomb Poison, just Fire Blast, and it does not take very much from non-stab frustration, even with spikes up. And if Sneasel is Screech Weezing on the switch, then it's got to stay in and take advantage of that Screech, and then get Sludge Bombed or Fire Blast. And Weezing can also just switch out if it wants to. And Sneasel is also rock weak, which is an issue, because yeah, sure, you can toxic the rocks, but they still can come in for a decent bit of time and turn you into offense. Pineco can also still spike up on you, even with toxic, so I think you should probably run Graveler with it. And then it comes a point where you might just want to use Gloom over Sneasel, since Sneasel basically mandates Graveler and Pineco, which can be a problem defensively. Sneasel's also physically frail and weak to fire and fighting, which are issues in a hate status, any kind of status. However, I think it's decent. It turns Zatu into offense, turns Walls Dugong, which are pretty nice traits. It's can be hard to switch into if you don't have a Weezing. If you play well with your scratches and frustrations with spikes up. Um, Last one, Corsola, probably below Mantine, above Mantine, not sure. I think all three of Hitmontop, Sneasel, and Corsola are worthy of B minus, even if I'm a little biased. Anyways, Corsola is good traits. Rock resist. It's rock type recover. That's great, but it's got Screech. It has access to Rock Slide, unlike Graveler. I mean, Graveler has Rock Slide, but its illegality is with Rapid Spin, so it's forced into HP Rock, which worsens EV's. It's true. And it's got Stab Surfer, threatening Doug Trio from being a good switch. Um, it can check Zatu, it counters Sphero, can check Dugong, it counters Rapidash, it can check Ninetales, though it hates being poisoned, it can check Curse Porygon, though it hates being paralyzed by the T-Wave, it counters Wigglytuff, it can check Persian if it doesn't have Thunder or Hypnosis has already gone off, meaning Sleep Clause is active. However, Horse has a lot of problems. It's countered by Weezing, basically. It doesn't like Stantler or Octillery since they can just crit fish. It doesn't like Doug Trio, even though it can threaten it because it's weak to Earthquake. It doesn't like Primeape. It doesn't like Kingler. It doesn't like Chinchou. It doesn't like Porygon. It doesn't like Magmar because Thunder Punches and Cross Chop do a lot. Doesn't like Flareon because Power Grass does a lot, and Hidden Power Ground. Well, actually, it answers Mixed Flare, but Hidden Power Grass does a lot, so can't answer Growth Pass Flare. Hitmonlee counters it. Ninetales doesn't like Toxic. Gloom counters it, and it can spread Paralysis or poison it. And Magnemite counters it, assuming no Earthquake, which I think is the play. And Earthquake is kind of not. I wouldn't use it. Anyway, so that's a lot of problems to have for one Pokemon, and so Corsola is extremely limiting on the builder. It basically mandates Ninetales due to the way it lets them Weezing, and I think Corsola has some nice traits, but it's really, really limiting. Also, sorry, interrupting myself. I think it mandates Pineco, because if you don't have a Pineco, probably using some sort of balance team, and on those balances, Graveler is pretty much always a better pick than Corsola. So I think Corsola basically mandates Ninetales for for wheezing, and it basically mandates Pineco because Pineco gives you a reason to not use Graveler, instead use Corsola. And then kind of need water in my opinion. One of the bulky waters, Octillery Dugong, usually Octillery. And then I think you probably usually just want a Xatu. It's probably not needed. Might not be needed, but I think it's just generally nice to have. And then your last teammate is probably just going to be Cursed Normal. I think it's really limiting, but it's an okay structure. I still like one team. There's probably some other ways to do Corsola, without Xatu, but it's really difficult to make a decent team with Corsola that's satisfying, which is unfortunate because, anyway, sorry, a little cut, interrupted again. Thankfully not very long this time. Anyways, Corsa being so hard to use makes me a little sad because I basically came up with it in terms of legitimately using it in this tier, and I wish it was better, but whatever, it's fine. Not gonna run with C tier because I think they're all bad. It's not really ordered, but it's like kind of like generally ordered. It's not really specific. It's this video's awful. I'm gonna have to make so many pain to edit. Anyways, thank you for watching. I am finishing recording this at 5:30 a.m. I started at like 1 a.m. Talk about a lot of interruptions. Probably repeated myself a shit ton throughout this, and I rambled like a motherfucker, but whatever. Bye.